Welcome to Spiritually Raw. I'm Jay, and this is April. We are your hosts and creators of the Gnostic TV network and the 5D economy. And to learn more about our unique multidimensional method for manifesting or becoming a broadcaster on Gnostic TV, check out our links below or connect with us on Instagram at 5D_mystics. Links below. Join us today as we navigate the realms of consciousness with our special guest, Ray Cappo, ex-punk, ex-monk, yoga teacher of teachers, and spiritual storyteller.
Yeah, this is going to be great. He has such an incredible story. As a teen in his 80s, Ray founded the hardcore punk group band Youth of Today, which championed the principles of clean living, vegetarianism, and self-control. And then after experiencing a spiritual awakening in India, which we're going to hear all about it, he formed a new band called Shelter, which is devoted to spreading the message of hope through spiritual connection. Now, Ray currently leads yoga retreats and trainings in his Super Soul Farm Retreat Center in upstate New York, as well as annual pilgrimages to India. How fun is that? He is the co-founder and the co-host of Wisdom of Ages, which is ranked #1 on Apple Podcasts for spirituality genre. And he's also the author of From Punk to Monk. It's a memoir. And we're excited to connect with you today. Thank you so much for joining us. And
great for being here. Great seeing what you do. It's impressive.
Thank you. Thank
So
you.
I think too, man. Thank you for the acknowledgement on that. You're impressive also. So let's get right down in, get everybody to get to know you and, see the vibe here. So very, very cool punk rock band and, really getting that lifestyle going. And, but more like really just kind of getting the word out about everything. When you associate punk rock bands, it's more anarchist, but yours wasn't necessarily that vibe.
Not at all. It was the opposite. It was sort of the idea of in my teenage years was, yeah, we need to change. We need to change. There needs to be change in the world. And I think that's what sort of the rebellious attitude, the alternative attitude of punk music or hardcore music was in the 80s. People were sick of just corporate arena rock, corporate metal, corporate music, and people wanted to be different and find themselves and be more artistic. And a lot of people, at least in my community, found Shelter in the Lower East Side of New York City, which was very creative, very free thinking, a little bit lawless, a little bit crazy. But sometimes when you take away all the laws and all the rules, it can go to chaos real quick. And so in my desire for an alternative, I found that people are choosing real crazy alternatives. Nothing is something I don't want to become. So I was attracted to the music and the energy, the rawness and the individuality of that creative edge. But at the same time, I just had some inner calling for clean living, positive attitudes. Back then, vegetarianism and veganism, which wasn't even in the conversation back then. It was just a weirdo if you were a weirdo into that stuff. But I got inspired.
Right.
I got inspired in it in the early 80s, and it was hard to do because my parents are Italian, so we have this meat every day.
Right.
So that was a very big challenge. And there was no veggie burgers, there was no vegan options, etc. like there are now.
That would have you discarded your own family.
So what did inspire you though at that era? You know what I mean? That phase of life then.
I just started thinking deeply about like, okay, wait a second. I love my dog. Why is a dog like my best friend, or why do we have dogs that are friends that we give names to? They're part of the family. I carry them, we sleep with them. Yet this other animal has a slightly different body, not much different. That thing is a commodity. So and I studied, what they at the time I was studying war, in social studies in high school, and they were like, yeah, they were telling us about propaganda films, like when they would go attack the enemy, before they would send the soldiers to watch propaganda films of, quote, the enemy. And in those films, they would dehumanize the enemy because it assists you to kill them, basically. If you can look at them as roaches and animals or uncivilized or heathens or whatever you want to call them, any pejorative to put them down or to despiritualize or dehumanize them. And I thought, wow, that's sort of what we did with animals. Like, one's our best friend and one is like a commodity, basically. It's a thing. And whenever you put a thingness on a living entity, it cuts a bit of our humanity. And so I just got that realization at a young age. There weren't even a lot of books about vegetarianism, but I found one that really resonated with me called Animal Liberation by Peter Singer. The problem was, and I was just too weak of a person to do it at the time because I lived with my family. I didn't know how to cook. I was just a kid. I was a little irresponsible, but it sort of resonated with me. But I made a deal with myself. I said, when I move out, I'm just going to figure it out. And
Hmm.
so I moved out when I was 18 and I just figured it out. And that
Are
was
you
that
still
was a big
today?
part of my path. Huh?
Are you still a vegan today?
Yeah, I'm vegetarian and vegan pretty much.
Uh-huh.
I won't say I'm strict vegan because I do certain things that maybe a strict vegan wouldn't approve of, but for the most part, it's been a massive part of my family's diet and my children's diet and my
That's
diet.
great.
Yeah.
So
And yeah,
what made you decide to leave the band and venture off to India?
I was really into yoga. I mean, and again, it's like not only vegetarianism, but yoga was not a household word. It was like a weird thing people would get into. A weird LA woman would get into it. That was the idea of what yoga was in the 80s.
Mhm.
And any yoga studio that did exist in the late 70s or 80s were connected with this, had a spiritual affiliation. Now yoga has become very secularized. It's become a very good fluid workout where you learn to breathe, you learn some mindfulness. But I had an attraction to Eastern thought, and because I felt like it was a very broad approach to spiritual life. So I got into yoga. I got into Ayurvedic medicine, which was also a an alternative healing method. So my whole life was sort of geared up as an alternative life. And because of that, one door led me to another door, led me to another chamber, led me to another room. And I just kept on following sort of this healing path or this grounded path, this to just discover myself. And with it, I started applying all this stuff to my life. And it sort of made me realize that even though the band got big and the band had some type of modicum of success, big deal. It's like, what do I want from this? How is this going to satisfy me? And because I was reading a lot of books by these swamis and sages and metaphysical books and books on spiritual thought, from Christ consciousness to Tibetan Book of the Dead to Jonathan Livingston Seagull, etc., the Bhagavad Gita, the New Testament, all of it made me like realize there's got to be something more than what the material world is offering. And then my father died sort of unexpectedly. I share about it in the book. It was sort of expected because he was in a coma, but
Mhm.
there was always this hope that he'd come out of the coma, and he just never did. And
Mhm.
after 3 years, he just left his body, and as tragic as it was, sometimes there's tragic things in our life that accelerate our spiritual growth, almost like trampoline us to catapult us to a next level of our life. So as tragic as it was for me to lose a pillar in my life, my father, because basically up to then, I really never saw the world as a problem. I saw everything's great. Everything's great. My success is at the tip of my fingertips. I have a great community of friends. I have good people in my life. I have a stable family. I have a venture. I get to travel the world. And then when that happened, and it almost sounds like arrogant because some people experience so much trauma and pain from childhood, but that was the biggest thing that sort of hit me. But that tragedy or that sort of sinkhole of material stability blended with the futility of material success made me realize, where is the stability in this world? There doesn't seem like there's any stability. And therefore, I took the whole death of my father as sort of a message, like a clarion call for me. Like, what are you doing with your life? What do you want to become? Do you
Mhm.
want success? What is success? And
Mhm.
it brought out these very big questions, these questions that are that it seems like these should be the genesis questions before we even walk out the door in the morning. What are we doing with our life? Where do we want to go? Where is our GPS destination set before I start driving really fast, before I start spending money, getting into debt, saving? Where am I going?
Mhm.
So let
And
me
that
ask
was
you
sort of,
this. When you
Yeah,
went to with all the books that you read, what drew you, or do you still feel that, hey, I needed to go to India, that you needed to go to India to really connect with it? Or do you feel like in any sense of it, could you have connected through the books, through anything like here living in the Western, or did you really physically need to take the embodiment of you and get over there, be in that land? Or, what?
sure.
Yeah,
That's a great
yeah.
question. It's a great question, and I don't think you need to go to India to find yourself or live in a cave or isolate yourself. For me, I think I did need to do that. I'm not asking anybody to do my particular path because I believe everybody's path is a signature path, and it's and there's some path. And even when I wrote my memoir, Punk to Monk, it's not for you to live my life. It's to as different as we are, we're all very, very similar. We all fall in love. We all get our heart broken. We all want fortune. Then we may get some fortune. We realize the futility of the fortune. And then sometimes we lose our fortune. And sometimes, we face a tragedy, a loss, a death. We're all so very similar. We have so much in common with our greatest enemies, and our best of friends. So as far as I went, I had a massive community of fans and friends at that time, and I had really cemented myself to a persona, um, of this singer, athletic singer of a positive straight edge band. And I really needed to go to India, not to like rebirth myself, but to find myself or convert myself, but to find an authentic self underneath the persona. And that's what I think India has the power to do, and the teachings of the East have the power to do. It's to say not to wear some other Hindu costume, but to take all the costumes off of the soul and to see
Mhm.
what's underneath all the costumes and who am I. And so for me, it was necessarily helpful to be in a completely different environment.
I don't think anyone that I've ever met, I don't know anyone that could possibly go to India and not have a life-altering experience to some degree. How long were you there? And what was your greatest transformation or experience that just jolted your whole life into another dynamic
That's a good
or
question.
another dimension?
That's a good question. Well, my time as a monk was about 6 or 6.5 years, but it was not exclusively in India. My first time I went to India was 4 months, and then I go to ashrams in America or Europe, and then I would travel back and forth to India. So it wasn't exclusively in India, and I share that in my book. But you're right. If you go with the appropriate intention, that's the only thing I'd add to your statement. If you're
Mhm.
going to sightsee, I don't think you're going to get what you want.
Mhm.
If you're going to, but if you're going there with a spiritual intention, like pilgrims have for millennia, you definitely India somehow delivers.
Mhm.
Um, and especially if you go with a guide or someone who can explain what's going on and what's the significance of this holy place or this river or this saintly person, etc. Um, so your question is, what was the most maybe significant or the first thing that sort of was paradigm shifting? I think the first thing was, I'm a New Yorker, and so therefore I'm a little bit cynical about everything and everyone. So I wasn't rich, but I had some money saved because I was touring. So I had about $25,000. I didn't bring it with me, but I had it in a bank in America. And my cynicism started saying, I'm probably going to go to India, and there's going to be some guru or something that's going to try to get all my money from me. That's how I went into like my spiritual quest. How pathetic is that? Um, but when you start to live with people who have nothing,
Mhm.
but they're very, very, very dialed into their spiritual path, and they're performing all different types of austerities with their body. They're going to bed super early, waking up super early, hours of meditation, selfless service, cold showers, regulated diet, fasting. It's just, and you think, okay, well, and got to figure also, this is India circa 1988. There is no central heating. There's no email. There's no
There's
cell
no
phones.
roads. There's no.
The roads were pathetic. There was no
Right.
highway, and there's a beltway. And right now there's a beltway around Starbucks. I mean, around Delhi, and there's a Starbucks on your way to the holiest cities in the world.
Right.
So it's a much different universe now. So this was pre-email. You know, you want to set up your time in an ashram. You're writing an airmail. If you're, you know, north of 50, you know what I'm talking about. What an airmail is. It's a feather light paper that you write. It's like rice paper, and you're writing it, and you fold it into an envelope because the envelope will weigh too much otherwise, and you send that out. You wait for a response. So everything was, you know, very backwards according to my American standards. But I started to realize, like, wow, these guys got nothing,
Mm-hmm.
and they're so happy. And
Exactly.
then I started to realize, wait a second, they don't want my measly $25,000. What are they going to buy? Are they going to buy more robes? What they have? All their possessions fit in a crate. What are they going to buy with my money? Why do they need money? They don't need money. What do they need? They don't need anything. You know what I need? I need what they have. And that was the first domino that really pushed me further on my spiritual path, was to realize if I could just learn how to be happy with nothing, then whether I have nothing or whether I have everything, I would keep myself in that bubble and life would be incredibly successful. And I thought that was the biggest gift and paradigm shift and pivot I did in the way I was moving in this world as of now. I've come from this world of consumption where not only do I fill my apartment and my house with stuff, I fill my basement with stuff, and then I'll fill my storage container with stuff. And we are like just trying to figure out how stuff can get me fulfilled and complete. And I'm trying to shove things in a God-shaped hole.
Mm-hmm.
The hole in my heart is God-shaped, and I'm trying to put adventure, romance, vehicles, everything I'm trying to shove in there except spirit. And so that was my first sort of serious wake-up call. And I found my time in India was a constant looking at myself in the mirror on a regular basis and seeing all my blemishes. You ever see those mirrors that you look at and it makes you can see all your pores? One of those, what do they call those?
It's called a 10x mirror.
Yeah, and that's what spiritual life is. And I felt like it was making me look at my ugly. And I was like, wow. And that was beautiful, because when you see you're ugly, it's the beginning of transformation. To notice where you've been so off.
The awareness.
So let me ask you this. Do you think that going from the Western civilization over to India, and you see, oh, well, all these people are just happy with nothing. They're living. They're not attached, right? They're very unattached. Do you think similarly the people from India would maybe come over to America and see, like, hey, these people are getting cool stuff? I mean, is there a happy medium here? Because you see one society I get that you see the Western side, it's all about accumulation, right? Like accumulate. Then you see India, which is like, hey, I'm good. I'm good with nothing. And, you know, give me a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I'll sleep on a crate or whatever and throw me a blanket. I'm good. Is there a happy medium, or is it just by infinite design? These are different pockets of the world, or are they different dimensions that we're visiting? Are we seeing different dimensions? Like, how do you perceive it?
That's a beautiful question. I perceived it as not everybody necessarily was in bliss, but people who are connected to a spiritual journey, I feel like, are in bliss, and you can have that with or without money, with or without resources. And I believe there's people who are, and especially at that time in India, there was, it's very hard in certain countries, according to their economy, to make some type of economic growth. There's like some financial a ceiling you're going to hit. So a big dream would be to go, oh, can I go to Europe or America or Toronto so I can, or get there, get my kids there so they can get into school and they can break out of this. It's the same thing my parents did when they came from Italy. They came, how can I raise my family here? There's more, it's a land of opportunity. And I get that. You can go that way, but you got to be careful for this Faustian trade-off where, and India is experiencing it right now. Send your kids to the West, raise your kids, and all of a sudden you realize my kids have lost their culture.
Mm-hmm.
And all the things that we did value in our culture, they've lost. And India's experiencing it right now because as The real shift in India wasn't from London when England took over, wasn't when the Mughals took over, wasn't when the Portuguese took over. They've had Afghans, they've had so many people try to convert, decimate, destroy their temples, destroy their culture, etc. That's not what is wrecking the ancient India. What's wrecking ancient India is satellite television and the internet, because it makes the West seem like this very shiny diamond when in fact it's like a piece of jagged, broken glass. You reach for it and you think, here's the wealth, and you suffer. And India's about to suffer everything that we've been suffering for the last, especially the last 40 years, because what we're going to see is a culture that had very high boundaries about what they consume on a regular basis. They're going to start running into the same problems we did. We're going to run into like 12-step programs, addiction programs, sex addiction, drug addiction, mental health issues. We are very expert in the West at painting over the dirt, but it exists there if you peel it back just a little bit. And I'm not saying India is this magical, emerald city. It's got issues, but when you start adding these consumption, junk food, alcohol, and no more parameters on what the culture traditionally had, then you're just asking for trouble. And we don't present ourselves like that, because we present ourselves. And if you do a lot of traveling in the world, you see everybody knows who Brad Pitt is. We take over this whole stage and we present ourselves in a certain way, and it's not necessarily the truth of reality, and we normalize it. We normalize crazy.
What is happiness to you? How do you define it?
Thank you for taking me off my rant. I appreciate that.
It's good.
I'm about to have a happy day. First of all, talking to you guys, I'm very happy.
Oh.
Talking about sort of well, sweet. You ask, very relevant questions to how can we progress in life, and that makes me happy. I love to do things like that. I love my morning rituals, spiritual rituals in the morning. That means a lot to me. I do a podcast and we talk about spiritual subject matters. You got the name wrong, by the way. It's called Wisdom of the Sages, which is a study. It's not a problem. It's not a problem. It's called Wisdom of the Sages, and it's a daily yoga podcast. When I say yoga, we're not teaching up dog or down dog. We're teaching the philosophy of the yoga system, which we'll teach in a deeper yoga course that I'll teach on for teacher trainees. And people generally like it, but they can't imbibe it, because if you just hear it once, it sounds good, but it's hard to change. It's hard to change from doing anything once. And going to the gym, you're not going to get ripped going to the gym once. You got to go on a regular basis. So the theory of transformation is we add spiritual wisdom to our life on a regular basis, and people who get into it, they listen like every day. It's like it's an addictive podcast.
Wonderful.
People are just searching for something.
They are.
It's
and
something feels disconnected for so many people.
You know what? We live in a very disconnected time. We can't get our information from any good source. People have oftentimes some weird agenda. There's a lot of hate in the air. And people are sort of disconnected with their spiritual self and want grounding. When we talk about spirituality, oftentimes we're finding scandals. And so we have you got to dig through you got to be like an archaeologist digging through lots of dirt to find a gem there.
That's true.
Will you be in India for at the later stages of your life? Do you see yourself there, and that's where you just evolve to the next place?
I think wherever God wants me, that's where I'll go. But and by the way, I'm really into switching out God for higher power, the universe, the white light, Krishna, Jesus, whatever you want to call God. I'm not claiming that there's one name of source, but I love India. India resonates with me. I spend a lot of time. I spend at least 3 months there a year. Wow. And I've been doing that for years.
So you got a lot of miles.
Yeah.
I got a lot of miles, my friend.
Talking about culture, you grew up in an Italian family, and I'm sure you did the Sunday dinners and all that, the meatballs and the spaghetti. How did you make that transition from a very cultured Italian lifestyle to, a Middle Eastern type of lifestyle? And I could see, your house is decorated with, let's say
Do
Middle Eastern or Indian artifacts or
Yeah.
sculptures. So how did you make that transition, especially when it comes to like the food that was such an important part of an Italian culture? And how did your
Sure.
family adapt to that as well?
Well, my family, my brothers, sisters, mothers, they never adapted to it. But food is a very big part of yoga culture, bhakti culture, Indian culture. Matter of fact, I didn't find so much difference between an Italian family and an Indian family. I found they're connected in so many ways, actually. Um, uh, but my mother recently at this punk hardcore record store in New York City, I did a book signing and it was packed. All my worlds collided sort of at once. It's sort of like all these fans from the band came, and then I had yoga students from New York City showing up, and then my oldest sister, my younger brother, and my mother showed up, and my mom's going to be 98 this year.
I got
And
Wow.
I know. And so it was one of these things like, oh, wow, this is awkward. Everybody's sort of crisscross. I always was very expert at compartmentalizing my life. So I'm home on Christmas. I'm home on Easter. Hey, everybody. And then I'm with leading a big kirtan, call and response chanting in India with hundreds of people singing. That's another facet of my personality. Then I'm on stage and somehow they all sort of blended here in the basement of this record store. And it was quite fun. And I didn't talk to my mom for a week later. And she just goes, I just read your book. I think it's going to be a bestseller.
That's nice.
It was actually nice. It might have been the nicest thing she's ever said to me.
Did you give her a signed copy of it at least?
You know what? Truthfully, there were so many people all around me at the thing. I didn't even get to say goodbye to her. So when she called me, I was like, I thought she's going to be mad at me, but she was in the best spirits
That's nice.
ever.
That's very nice. How do you view God? Do you believe that God is going through these different facets of life and the journey and these different phases of punk band to a monk to, leading pilgrimages? Do you feel like we are God? Do you feel like God is a separate source that we just tap into and we're just, we're a creation of it? Or do you feel like we are it? And we literally are little.
I love that question. That is the question. That is the question. And in the bhakti path we follow, they say yes and no, and that means yes, we are God, and no, we are not God. And I'm going to explain that even further. A drop of water is just like the ocean. A drop of the ocean is just like the ocean. It's like it if you were to put it under a magnifying glass. It's got the same elements. It's made up of that. It's in quality, it's the exact same thing, but in quantity, it's tiny, it's finite, where the ocean is infinite. So we are spirit. We are part of God. We have all the qualities of God. Sat Chit Ananda, which is an element of eternality. The soul is eternal, they say. Matter always changes, or as C.S. Lewis says, we don't have a soul. We are a soul that has a body. And that's how Vedic teachings or yogis see it, that the body is always in flux, but we're spirit. We are actually eternal beings. We're not born sinful. It's a pure soul theology, means we're pure. We just forgot who we are. And therefore we don't identify with our purity and our godness. We identify with, I'm an Italian American yoga teacher guy, punk guy. That is not me. That is a temporary version of me for a moment, but there's a real me with a capital I underneath this costume. Underneath that. And so we are part of God, but we forget, and we can be covered by illusion. And therefore I take on this temporary identity, and then we suffer duality due to that identity. For example, I grew up with long, beautiful hair, and then I lose my hair, and I'm like, oh my God, who am I without hair? Or I lose my beauty, or I lose my wealth, or I lose my career. And we extend ourselves to not only think we are our body, we think we are the accoutrements of the body. We think we are our career. We think we are our net worth. We think we are our bank, our bank balance or the car we drive. And we're none of those things. We're actually a spiritual being, part of God. So therefore, we believe we are part of God and we are God-like, but we are also tiny. And in Bhakti, we want to connect through love. So in Bhakti, there's a lot of mantras that have names like Krishna, Rama, Vishnu. Why? Because we want to develop a loving relationship with God. And we believe that God is also male and female, like Radha Krishna, Lakshmi Vishnu, Sita Ram. So there's a feminine element to the divine and a masculine element to the divine.
Get all.
But is God, yeah. And so that is the form. In Bhakti, you connect through form. But in other yoga paths, we also accept that other people connect to God in a different way, which is God is an energy. God is light. God is truth. God is everything. That's another way to perceive God in Vedic teachings. And so which one is right? Well, they're both right.
They're all right.
How can they both be right? Well, there's a sun globe. Just right now, I can say, yeah, the sun's in the room. That doesn't mean the sun globe is in the room. That means the energy from the sun is in the room. So is the sun and the sunlight the same? No, they're actually different, and they're sort of the same. You can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
So in Bhakti yoga, there's the passion or the connection is with the actual form of God and the prayers to God and the relationship in loving service to God. And in other facets of the yoga system, God is light, God is truth. We are all one, and they can both coexist
if you want them to.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
we're gonna have all the links in the description for people to find out more about you, your podcast and anything like that. Tell us more about, how people can connect with you.
What you got going on
What you got going on next, before you love and leave us. I mean, tell us all that experience and journey there, brother.
Thanks so much. So every year I take a group on pilgrimage to India, which is
That sounds like fun.
It is super fun. It's the funnest thing I do all year.
Wow. How long does it last?
It's 2 weeks. It's 2 weeks, and I take people to all my favorite places that I go, and we sing. We do kirtan, call and response chanting in all holy places, and it's one of the most fun things I do. That's on my website, raghunath.yoga. You spell Raghunath, RAGHUNATH.yoga. And also, right after that, I decided to add a second retreat, which is Nepal, and it's the same thing. It's like the pilgrimage. Nice. We do morning and evening satsangs where we come together, we sing, I tell stories, but we trek during the day. And it's not crazy with an ice pick scaling ice canyons. It's just trekking through beautiful Himalayan ranges. People are carrying our stuff for us, and it's wonderful. And we have a really nice community of really nice people that go. And then in January, I do a big trip in India, 200 and a 300-hour teacher training for yoga teachers. We do 2 different music schools for kirtan. People want to study how to lead kirtan. All that stuff's on my website as well. And then, of course, throughout the year, I do yoga retreats, bhakti retreats, kirtan retreats at our Super Soul farm. And all that stuff is available on my website, raghunath.yoga.
Right. All right, cool. And we're gonna have all the links in the description below. So, okay, so it's really nice to meet your spirit, brother. It really is. And thank you for your service and what you're doing for humanity and helping others get something
balance,
connected, whatever you want to call it.
Keep up the good work.
Yeah, you too, man.
Keep up the good work. You guys are messengers of light and of truth, and I'm really grateful that you had me.
Yeah.
Likewise. Thank you so much. And together, with Ray's help, we are turning the universal key to global harmony and creating a unified world. Thank you so much for tuning in. And remember, tune in often, tell all your friends, and most importantly, may all your dreams come true. Many blessings.
Haribol. Thank you very much.
Much love.